Thank you, everybody, for joining us for Advocacy 104 today. I'm super excited about this training. We have two lovely experts training us today, and I just want to first say thank you for coming and thank you for being you, because you all are the ones that are going to create change. You are the ones that are coming here to learn and then to put what you learned into action. So I appreciate you, and I thank you for supporting the Women's Fund and to keep coming to our events like this. So, thank you.
And my name is Maria. I'm the executive director of Yes, This Is Your Women's Fund Miami-Dade. We are so happy to be in our, guess what? One of our new homes. Today is a hybrid event. Women's Fund, Impact Collaboratives always used to be in person, and then COVID came, and actually it worked to our benefit because we have people in a lot of different places joining us today. So we have some in person, some hybrid. We're going to try and get better and better about being inclusive and making sure that everybody gets to participate fully. The important thing is it's not just about now. This advocacy training will live on, just like Advocacy 101, 102, and 103 that were done by Vicki Lopez, who's now a state representative. Those trainings live on and they're approved. We're going to come to some basics today, and we can go advanced. We have a few amazing speakers. But first, let's go through some housekeeping. For you are here live, you get to eat. You have virtual bagels, all the rest of you. Please make yourselves at home. I do want to ask everybody who's there online, good morning, good morning, good morning. Please go ahead and turn on your video, but do mute yourself, because Tommy and Sam might be able to do it, but it makes them feel bossy. They'd rather have you mute themselves, yourselves. And then on we go. Really very special thanks here to FIU and Mana at Wynwood. The Women's Fund is here trying to create a post-silo Miami for women and girls. So I know there's somebody here who lives in Minnesota. I'm from Wisconsin. If you're from northern Florida, you know what a silo is. It's really important to have your storage place of your important, whatever you're doing in your silos. But we must leave our silos to accelerate improvements in change in knowledge. And so that's what your Women's Fund is trying to do. Create a post-silo Miami for women and girls, because there's a lot of work to be done. And very frankly, the Women's Fund would love to be out of business in another 30 years. We've been around for 30 years. We gave the first grant to Lotus House, Leap for Ladies, Urgent Inc., FAM, Marlene Bastian, who's now a commissioner, started FAM. Her first $2,000 grant is from this organization. Why? Because we've got a big ear and a big gender lens. We've got a close ear to what's going on in the community for gaps and needs. We're not the largest organization, but we're the one that is a clearinghouse for coming back and forth. So when we say this is your Women's Fund, we really mean it. So on we go. Clearly, this Women's Fund was started by an amazing speaker. I think she's 89. She was, those of you who were at the Power of the Purse was there, but it's carried on by many, many, many incredible men also, but mostly women throughout the 3 decades of our existence. So we have a powerhouse board. Some of them are here today. You just met Arthi, our board chair, and we thank you all. Many of you will be online as well. So thank you for all that you do. We often have folks who are in public service who are joining us as well. So I can't see as well as I usually do, but I'm guessing that there are representatives from, I know people from the Cava's office have signed up, offices of many different commissioners. So we'll see later who all attended, but a special shout out to our public servants. Couldn't do without our donors. Everybody gets fuel. Your car has got fuel. For those of you who are here, takes electricity to get us together here online, and this organization is no different. So whether you're fueling with your time, slot, or treasure, thank you. Makes it more, even more your Women's Fund. And on we go to I like to talk in pictures, and Natasha is on our team. She helps me do some of these things. So the Women's Fund has 4 programs. You're living one of them right now. The convenings and impact collaboratives, which are based on our 4 pillars of economic mobility. Hey, Daddy, why are you still paying women less? We're not there yet, right? Freedom from violence, why sex be exposed, freedom from domestic violence can't be thriving if you're not free from violence. Health and well-being, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So we have an optional petition signing at the end of this session, and leadership. So about leadership today, it's not just about being able to envision yourself as a leader in a corporation like Pepsi or AT&T with representatives today, or to be a leader. You can envision yourself being the mayor of Miami-Dade County, like now we have a leader. It's also about access to leadership and owning it. And the more we who care about women and girls own our right to access to leadership, think of the acceleration, getting out of our silos, working on these things that we all care about, leveraging resources on behalf of women and girls, we can accelerate improvement, right? Change is a word that works. Sometimes it's also improvement, and sometimes it's just retrofitting. Many systems were not originally designed to support women and girls because we didn't think that early child education was important. We didn't really realize that most of the brain is formed in those first 3 years. That system does not work. That's why we have our grantee program, which is our second program that we have. So we have our convenings impact collaboratives. We have our grantee program. So I mentioned the big grants we had before. We have representatives here from the University of Miami, C3. I know online, we have many of our grantees, Overtown Youth Center, Shades Learning, Empowering Early Learning Educators. Those brilliant people are trying to fix and retrofit designs to make this system, which is an impediment to women's economic mobility, work better. Early child education. That's our grant making program. Right behind me, very easy, public awareness campaigns. Yeah, we're famous for the Stop Sex Trafficking campaign, and a lot of people love that one. We've got some people who I know are involved with NAMI who are here today. We have a suicide prevention, focusing on women and girls, and self-harm prevention campaign with NAMI. It's got all kinds of great things going on, including our heat, the effects of extreme heat on pregnant people. And Viviana, who you're going to hear from in a second, is actually going to go speak at a roundtable with United Way and the Children's Trust immediately and in here. So we're busy. Your Women's Fund is doing a lot of things to leverage resources on behalf of women and girls. And we really do it because we have such strong relationships with our partners. So I know that there are people, I don't know if Tina Brown's on yet, Overtown Youth Center, Honey Shine Program, the YWCA, Malia from League for Ladies, I know you hear Girls Inc., Girl Power, FEMA, I know it was going to be on. All of these brilliant leaders and their networks of their organizations, learning to how better advocate. Not like we're not very advocating, we can always do better. We can always be more confident. We can always find more connections and how we can leverage these connections together. So that's what we're doing today. The 4th program that we have is our newest program because we keep on iterating. 30 years later, we know we have to keep on being current. Data and research, the lack of it makes women and girls invisible. That's what the United Nations said, and we know that to be true. So we have an amazing program. And Viviana, I'm going to let you come right here and tell us what we've got today.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us. As Mario mentioned, my name is Viviana. I'm Senior Research and Policy Manager at the Women's Fund, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about our research and data program. What you see on the screen right now is our gender equity dashboard, and it is what we created as a platform where data lives, gender, and if available, race and ethnic data lives, so that you're able to easily access it. And we do the work for you, right? We look at the different sources and we built it so that it's easily accessible. and that it's easy to understand as well. For the purposes of today, we wanted to show the leadership section, which includes mostly where we stand on women being a part of elected officials and elected positions. So that's what you're seeing on the screen. The next one is our economic mobility section, where we highlight the median full-time earnings. So for when you're talking about advocacy and advocacy training, if you want to advocate for equal pay, like a lot of the work that we do, then you want to know what the median full-time earning is between men and women, right? As well as the segregated by race and ethnicity. We also have the labor force participation. Oh, go back one, please. Thank you. And we have a map that has the median full-time earnings by census tract. So you're able to see a little bit better which regions of our county are doing better when in regards to pay equity or not that great, right? So where we need to improve. For the next one, and another topic that we talk a lot about is maternal health. So on the screen, you're seeing maternal mortality and infant mortality. And it is disaggregated by race and ethnicity. So in the first section where you're seeing maternal mortality, that first line at the top is actually Black or African American. They're at 60, this is in 2020, it's at 60.1. That's 3 times more than a white woman. So showing these disparities and knowing the data is very important to us. It helps us make women and girls visible again. And so it is readily available on our website. You can go into our data and research page. I think for my people online, they're gonna drop the link in the chat. And then our next venture is the Gender Equity Index, which is currently in the works. And what we're doing is compiling metrics that will help us build a score to see how far away from achieving gender equity Miami-Dade County is. So this is in the project. So if you want to learn more, please make sure to link in the chat and then to scan the QR code and sign up. We will be having various policy papers attached to our scores that explain a little bit more of our methodology and what we're showing, as well as more information on our launch, which is to be confirmed, but September, end of September. So put it on your calendars. And that's it for me.
So talk about stronger together, we would not be able to launch that gender equity index without the support of the Children's Trust. And that's all of us. The Children's Trust really reports to all of us because we're taxpayers, right? So we're going to look at all those ties behind how by speaking up, we end up leveraging resources to benefit the retrofitting and fixing of systems that support women and girls, thus the entire community. So I would be remiss if I did not say the Women's Fund is focused on women and girls because that's where we find so many inequities. And we do know, and research shows that when women and girls are elevated, the entire community and the entire economy as well, if that's what speaks to you. So no, there's nothing anti-men here in any way, shape, or form. It's about fixing inequities. So as I've been chatting, those of you who are online, hopefully been filling in the poll, and those of you who are sitting here, need to scan that QR code to be able to do the poll. We do use them. Camila, who's the genius behind here, the Wizard of Oz, for the Impact Collaboratives, uses the polling information a lot. It's Viviana, as is our beautiful board and our research committee. So we do thank you for participating, and that includes the survey that you're going to get after the Impact Collaborative. So please do. And now I don't have to introduce her because you can introduce herself, which is a much more interesting way. We are so grateful to you, Agatha, not only for presenting today and bringing your genius, but for the ongoing and expanding partnership and collaboration between the Women's Fund and the Maurice Ferré Institute at FIU. So I'm gonna let you tell us all about it. Thank you so much for being here.
Everyone for joining us in person today and for everyone online. My name is Dr. Agatha Caraballo. I'm the founding director of the new Maurice A. Ferré Institute for Civic Leadership. I'm also an associate teaching professor in the Department of Public Policy Administration in the Miami-Dade School of International Public Affairs at Florida International University at FIU. Really excited to participate, to facilitate this Advocacy 104 training. Those of you that have taken classes with me, my students kind of know I like to be less of a sage on a stage and more of a facilitator. So I will be asking for you all to kind of, chime in, provide some feedback, make it more interactive and engaging. So I have been at FIU and just celebrated my 10-year anniversary. But yeah, I am a proud FIU alum, actually of the communications department. And so I'm really excited and I want to thank FIU CARTA and Wynwood for hosting us today. If you didn't know about this hidden gem in Wynwood, it's an amazing location and just really thankful to the support from CARTA in hosting us for this event. So as an instructor, I started off at FIU as a fully online digital instructor, and actually I've taught the majority of the classes over the last 10 years at online. So, of course, I always enjoyed being on Zoom and also being in person and providing some opportunities for engagement. I'll go into a little bit later about the Ferré Institute and what we're doing, but it's really to become a public service hub, an outlet for bringing people together to have these conversations around advocacy, around civic leadership. One of the poll questions that are kind of going out is, how many of you have had an opportunity to watch the Advocacy 101 through 103 trainings? Okay, fantastic. So what we're going to do is just hopefully everyone that, if you haven't had a chance, definitely take the time, listen to it, even if, maybe perhaps played in the background during your commute. There's really a lot of information. So if you go to the next slide, I'm just going to do a quick recap. Just because, again, there was a lot of information that was covered. We're going to kind of go over a little bit on it today, but again, asking you guys to provide a little bit more context from your own experiences so that, again, we can share with one another our own, what works and what, suggestions we have to improve. So obviously we're looking at advocacy. One of the first things that was covered in the previous is the difference between an activist and an advocate. The definition of advocacy is basically some public support for or recommendation for a particular cause or legislation. Does anyone from that watched the attending, for instance, what would be the difference between an advocate and an activist? Anyone want to jump in? What's the big difference between the two?
Speech versus organization.
Absolutely. So it's an action. A lot of times we like to say that public administration is the law in action, and that legislation is passed, but it isn't until it's implemented. So you can have support, again, activists is taking a little bit further and putting in the actions to. But there's a lot of ways. I think with civic leadership, there's a lot of ways to get involved in doing that. I would say some people are going to give a little, some are going to give a lot, some will give all. Some will donate their time, some will donate their money, some will donate their manpower, their woman power. There's a lot of different ways to get involved, whether it's following on social media, it's commenting. But when you start putting into action, it's really where you move from being an advocate to an activist. So what it means to advocate for the Women's Fund. Obviously, this is an amazing organization that I could not be more proud to facilitate with. And for those of you that went to the recent Power of the Purse, you see the huge impact that this organization is having. And like many things, there's a lot of issues that impact us across our community and across the world, but there is obviously a disproportionate impact on women and on children. So when we're advocating under the Women's Fund, what does that mean? Anyone want to chime in and provide an example. What does it mean for you to advocate under the women's, before the women's?
I'll do it.
I'm gonna start.
Looking at the county budget and how women and girls are represented and supporting, those budget line items.
So it's knowing what's going on in our legislative body locally. I think it's also knowing about the community organizations, the partners, the pulse of what's going on in the community. And so that when we're going out there with the data and the information, why collecting that information, that data is so important, so that when we're going and we're contacting our elected officials, we're armed with information. Data is power. I remember the first time I taught statistics, one of the first things that I teach is that data is power, but also statistics lie. So wanting to have a discerning eye and knowing where you're getting your information from, how credible it is. And again, wanting to be able to present information that's valid and reliable so that when you're providing a source of information, you're trustworthy and they're going to trust the information that you're providing out there. We know there's a lot of misinformation out there. So it's important for us to be those discerners and to help filter, put together accurate and correct information. So going into skills and practical strategies for advocating and promoting issues, one of the other cool questions that we asked was how many of you have ever attended a public meeting? Which is quite kind of show. When I first started teaching the integrated seminar in public policy course as part of the capstone course for the Bachelor of Public Administration, now Bachelor of Public Policy and Service, I would ask our students to go to public meetings. If they couldn't go in person, and they could attend in government meeting on campus. Of course, now, with COVID, Zoom make public meetings a little bit more accessible. But you'd be surprised at how many people don't know that one, these meetings are public and that anybody can go to them within their communities. Where to find the information. I remember reading not too long that there are certain communities that started offering childcare at their public meetings because they realized that was, a burden from participation. Obviously, the time, the location, there's a lot of different factors that limit people from being able to participate in their public meetings. But the first one is just knowing that these are open and that they're available to go out there and see. How many of you have ever written a legislator? Written, called, just reached out? Fantastic. With the seminar course that I recently taught is what we did is we had the students identify an issue. Some semesters I had students allow them to pick their own topics, whichever policy issue that they were passionate about. In other cases, we had elected officials submit topics, whether it was a county commissioner, a state senator, or a U.S. representative. And then we would have students, research and provide recommendations on those. But getting them comfortable in contacting, picking up the phone, making a call, requesting a meeting, putting in a little request. It can be a little intimidating. And I realize that even for students doing this for credit as part of the class, there's still a good amount of intimidation. But just kind of putting themselves out there. And I'll admit this last semester, out of 9 students, I think only 3 heard back from the elected officials that they contacted. And only 1 had a meeting during the semester. But again, I don't say that to deter, but one thing, if you watch the other advocacy 101 through 103 is a lot of it takes persistence. It can't just be a one and done. You can't just go in there and be like, okay, I reached them, I contacted them, right in your back, okay, that's the end of the story. As part of our Ferré Institute, we do a series of workshops called Generation Civics that we started in the spring and we've been continuing into the fall. So like this workshop, it's geared more towards students, but it's government 101, which we'll go into a couple more slides, kind of giving the overview of what government is, contacting your representative, then also tying voting to the sustainable development goals. So a little bit later for the presentations, we'll briefly go over local, state, and federal advocacy. I'm going to focus a little bit more on local, and then Ellyn, our speaker who will follow, will focus more on state advocacy. Federal, not the focus of this workshop, but again, still important. I personally, I'm really excited to be presenting on local because that's where it's closest to us. The decisions that are made in our own backyard are more likely to impact us, not to say that it happens in DC and Tallahassee, doesn't have a trickle down effect. But again, our local decisions are closest to us, and we have the most power of our voice by proximity, by access to speak up local people. Preparing for your advocacy efforts, research, come armed with information, but also knowing who you're reaching out to. Know your elected officials, know what issues are important to them, know who is a champion for a particular issue. So, for example, if I needed to go about something around transportation, which kind of commissioner would I probably be most likely to reach out to regarding the transportation issue because they've made that point. Yeah, Ellyn Bogdanoff. So knowing your different, elected officials, but also knowing their projects that they're very passionate about, and knowing where they stand with the information. Because again, if you're going in knowing that somebody's very hardline and issue, yes, you can go in there, but again, also looking for the allies instead of implementing as well. So again, finding, contacting your legislative officials, laying the groundwork. Again, I'm not going to go over everything again, because a lot of that in that presentations, workshops 1 through 103, gives a lot of good information. A lot of it is the information out there. There's a lot of, right now it's Google searches, being able to find out who your county commissioner is, who your city council, what districts you live in. So that kind of stuff, and what's the best way to contact them? Recently, we had Commissioner Ellyn Bogdanoff, and she said, even though she's active on Twitter, don't reach her on Twitter. That's not the way to file, or to share your concerns. Yes, you can tweet at her, but if you want, really get on the radar and share your concerns, going to the official channels. So how to interact with elected officials, again, first and foremost, just being respectful, but also knowing the ways that it's going to make it official to get in a visit, and how to maintain a relationship and being a resource. And that kind of goes back to being a source of reliable, trustworthy information. So going on, actually found this poster on Amazon, which I think I might put in my office. It just kind of shows the overlap of who does what. When I first started serving on a city Miami advisory board for senior citizens, I was always surprised how many concerns we got about Medicaid and Social Security, and explaining that this was not a city and municipal concern. So really wanting to first, we're wanting to advocate on the issue, knowing who does what. What is in the purview of the federal government, the state, local, and where there's overlaps. Next slide. And then again, knowing who they are. This is a very simplified chart. There's obviously a lot more nuances. But when we're looking at local government, it's also important to know your form of local government. So the first one, mayor, council. What is the difference between a strong mayor and a weak mayor?
A strong mayor is also the city manager.
Yeah. So a lot of times, a weak mayor, it's more of a ceremonial position. They have kind of equal standing as the council members. So they don't have that, as much of a strong authority and power. So Miami-Dade County Mayor, Danielle Levine-Cava, is an example of a strong mayor. City of Miami Mayor Francis Torres is an example of a weak mayor in the sense that he doesn't have the same administrative authority to be able to hire and fire administrative department directors. So in a commission plan, again, there's kind of standing there between mayors and commissions. And then the city manager plan is kind of a more common form of government where there is a professional administrator. The International City County Management Association is an accrediting body. And the whole idea is between having a city manager and a professional, insulating them against political influences, presidents, in the sense that they're trained as basically a CEO of the municipality. Let's go to the next slide.
So when we talk about local advocacy, there's been a lot of questions about home rule. And Miami-Dade County is one of those charter communities, charter counties, that made back to 1957. It's the whole idea behind home rule is that decisions that aren't made at the state and federal level should be up to the decisions of local communities to decide what's best. A couple of years ago, I did a workshop up in, even though we're in Miami-Dade County, up in the city of Weston. Weston, the community that it has a tiny, at time 5 and to their buyer, the Broward Sheriff, they contracted with companies for their planning, zoning, their sewer, everything. So in some cases, states are going to decide what's kind of best for them. But again, when it comes to home rule, realizing that there's if there's legislation passed that kind of like the individual decisions that impact on their any examples that anybody wants to provide of where they live about that? Make decisions that they agree?
I'll go again. So I live in Coconut Grove and have for 30 years. And my city commission was changed. So I had my commissioner, no longer my commissioner. So it's all in the courts right now, but I was used to being able to go. And I really understood my community quite a bit because a lot of people in the Grove meet and we talk about local issues and we care about each other. And all of a sudden I couldn't vote. So that's an interesting one. I felt it.
I've been for years. I'm in and out because I went to college in Orlando, but I've lived in Florida for almost 10 years, and it truly is comforting. And I've seen it develop in such a massive way from almost 10 years ago. I remember going to a much more rundown library, and as I keep going back from college, I keep seeing things continue to develop, and I see the love that's put into the community. And I went to the library yesterday after years of not going there, and it will be looking like it's out of the 80s. And now it looks like some high-tech, crazy sort of place that is just really nurturing for education.
And I said, like, if I was different communities are gonna have different priorities.
And I had the privilege of growing up here in Alcata, so I've seen the growth. And you couldn't walk in Wynwood at night when I was coming up. My middle school here, Robert Lee, is now Jose something. They tore that down and rebuilt. But yeah, there was a time you couldn't walk in this neighborhood. So I've seen the evolution firsthand. And then on the second part of that, working for AT&T, I was also the account manager for all the public sector segment for AT&T. So my accounts were City of Miami, City of Miami Beach, City of Hollywood. The most interesting one and busy was City of Miami Gardens. So that's another evolution I got to see. And their number one concern is safety. I mean, like, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Mayor Oliver Gilbert now. And so he really fought that whole city around. So we were able to be a part of that technology, transition for them. And so that's another one that, and then of course my church home is in that city as well, Miami Garden. So yeah, definitely love to see the, the growth.
Absolutely, and just some of the examples we just gave for Miami Gardens, program, just two neighborhoods within the city of Miami itself.
I want you to know, I have to say that I am asking people online if they have anything, and we can have people ask questions. So
Absolutely.
want everybody here to know that we are paying attention to folks online, but nobody's volunteered yet.
I'm gonna tell you this, you're gonna ask. But we can go to the next one. Some municipalities, we have a lot. in Miami-Dade County. And as we mentioned, they all have very unique characteristics, unique needs, unique structures and formats. Dating back to our earliest, Miami, incorporated in 1896 to our most recent in Cutler Bay. What I do encourage you is, depending on wherever you live, visiting their websites, making note of their public meetings. Even if you're not able to attend everyone, just kind of keeping it on your radar. And, you know, there's different, you know, I know that it's hard sometimes to go over every agenda for every different thing. But following on social media if possible, so you can get those little updates, those little reminders. It's really important. I've always been surprised going to different public meetings, and unless there's a very contentious issues, it's usually the usual suspects. You know, and I think there's a lot of voices that aren't represented in a lot of these meetings, are not being heard. So I think that if we make that effort to not only encourage ourselves to reach out and to make our opinions heard, but also, you know, letting our family and our neighbors know, you know, about these opportunities as well to get engaged. I'm not going to go into this too much because again, this is for the next presentation, but obviously just kind of noting who are our state representatives within Miami-Dade County. So knowing within your municipality, within your city, within your county district, but also knowing the state representatives who may represent you. So, not going to go into a lot of these, but I do think it's important, as I mentioned, for trickle down to know that decisions are being made up at the state level that are going to impact us locally. I can see quite a few things within these last couple months that impact me very, very personally, from my work at FIU to as a mother of a child with special needs. And again, I don't need all of these things to impact me personally to care about them, but just know that somebody is advocating for these changes. So whether you're advocating for or against them, just knowing what's going on and knowing that at one point or another, whether you agree or you disagree, that it's important to use your voice.
We'll be getting a copy of this.
Yes, and on the bottom, very tiny, there's a source notes.
Okay, and this is all recorded, and we do ask everybody to plagiarize, cut, reuse. You have our official permission to go on our website, womensfrommiami.org, impact collaboratives on the menu, and you can see Advocacy 101, 102, 103, and this one, and please take it to your classrooms, your parlors, wherever you want.
No.
That's why we have to source it.
All right, all right.
Have to stay up to date on, you know, people are advocating for so much different legislation, and this last couple of months, I mean, it was just like one after the other. And how do you know about that in advance? Because a lot of things were shocking, and it was coming out, and we were in. And it just didn't stop. It was so much legislation.
It is. It's almost, it's a barrage. There's so much that like, you barely have a chance to catch your breath before, you know, focusing on the next. It is. It's a full-time job. I mean, there are literally people, you know, whose full-time job it is to monitor, you know, bills and different facts. I personally, I have Google keyword searches that will send me little notifications. It's like a little notification. There's bill trackers at the different websites that you can put in keywords to notify you or just anything that your elected officials are voting on. It can get overwhelming. And at one point or another is one thing that we've realized, even within the courses that I'm teaching, there's so many complex issues. There's so many wicked problems. We have to take it one step at a time, one issue at a time, because otherwise we're going to burn ourselves out and we're going to spread ourselves thin. Fighting where we can and how we can, but then also realizing obviously that strength in numbers. We're not going to be able to do this.
Just to follow up that, how do we find out what they're working on before they create these bills that they put out?
Oh,
You know.
probably committees,
Okay.
You know.
That's the best part.
yeah, because I think with most of these things, they have to go through committees before
Yeah.
they actually going, so. Whether you're focusing on, following the meditation committees, you're following, there's a lot of different things, but again, keyword searches. There are websites, skill trackers that will kind of help you on this, but, finding those resources, that are providing information from Women's Fund, the League of Women Voters, that have done a really good job at distilling this information. So we know there's a lot of data, there's a lot of things going on, but also one thing that I've also is, realizing you do what you can, but just not allowing yourself to get overwhelmed. Yeah. We take it one day at a time, one step at a time, one issue at a time, and realizing that we're not alone and bringing together others. Obviously with, as women and men, we care, and a lot of times we want to take on so much and do so much, and we all, but having to also realize that at the end of the day, that if we're not protecting our peace of mind, our health, we're not going to be any good to anyone. So trying not to get overwhelmed and realizing, okay, we're going to fight today and we'll continue to fight tomorrow.
Good morning. One thing I wanted to ask that as well, with respect to your questions, is a lot of these issues that come up on the state side, typically things that are local issues for state legislators. And so what happens is that if you are not familiar with your local legislator, or your local commissioner, then more than likely you're not going to be familiar with your state legislator. But if you do have a relationship with your local commissioner, you can advocate on behalf of, whatever the potential issues are. And typically you would rely on your commissioner to go ahead and advocate on the state side, reference the issue that are coming up with legislative session begins and committee starts. Things. And other times, what happens is that what happens during the committee sessions are really the results of what's happening in these communities that the state legislator lives in. And so, it's personal issues and things that maybe their friends, their family, their constituents are dealing with. And if you're not, in relationship with your local government or perhaps the state legislature, so the information that I think Dr. Caraballo shared initially was really important, because knowing those key players is how we get involved and kind of know what happens when it comes to the
And that's important, everything that's coming up under, for the most part, is coming from local representatives, from their home constituents. And it really is true that the speaking will be soil. So sometimes the loudest voice, and if somebody has an influence, so we just need to make sure that we have our voices for us. The next one. So one thing that we are obviously kind of trying to do, and as I mentioned, within my class that I teach, I have students looking at policy issues, and we try to tie them to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Obviously, within our group, number 5, gender equality is a big one, but I think if you look at all of the SDGs, there's an impact on every aspect. In some cases, yes, disproportionately impacting women. But I think a lot of times when we're looking for information and we're trying to make a case, tying them to these goals, because ultimately it comes down to quality of life for humans, quality of life for the planet, for our cities, for our community. So when we can tie them into larger goals, that again, best practices, if you will, coming with information and data that's relying on the Women's Fund, the Metropolitan Center, and others for information. But then again, knowing that there's a lot of people doing this work around the sustainable development goals and how we can add our voices and our resources to help advance these missions. So within our cities, within our states, within our market community. So now I'm going to just, as I kind of wrap up, my little plug for the Ferré Institute. I'm really proud that this year we were recognized as a voter-friendly campus for our efforts around voter outreach, education. We did National Voter Registration Days. We just had a series of different events, early voting to the polls. It's really one way in particular at FIU, and you see that there have been efforts to restrict voting, and it's more important for us that we give not only young people, students, but everyone the opportunity to participate and to make their voice heard. This is our new space that we are moving into. This is on the Modesto campus down south. So you can see our space coming up. Can't wait to have you all come and visit us when we have our grand opening. But this space is really going to be a place for us to have workshops, for example, like this in our professional seminar room. We'll have offices for visiting scholars. And then our reading room is where we'll have the Ferré collection, which will include archives and documents from the Maurice A collection that'll be available for research to public and scholars. And again, I am so pleased to just have been in this opportunity to facilitate this workshop. Obviously, I think we could have spent hours here talking about this, but all thinking about, again, one, go back and watch all the Advocacy 103, 104, and this workshop training as well, share it with your colleagues. But also just reach out, connect with one of us. I have our link tree, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or on social media, but also hoping within the time that we have here online. For those of you online, I suggest that you feel free to share your LinkedIn or your contact if you'd like to connect with people that are in person. I hope to network and connect with one another.
You know, with the stuff to print, and we ran out, so he bought 2 packs, you know, for me to refill.
Oh.
So he placed them on the desk where she's at. She just took it up and dropped it on the floor. I don't think I'm working on her, and I'm very.
We connected to speaker.
It's
fine.
That was a question. Was that a question? Somebody had?
I think they just unmuted themselves on this thing. Did you turn it off?
Did you turn it off?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Can I do my answer here?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Megan, can you say a few words, please?
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Like Murphy's Law of Technology, whatever.
Okay.
So, with that, yeah, we're gonna go ahead. I'm gonna wrap it up. This move on for next week. We're gonna start with the break.
No, we have plenty of time. So I'm aware.
Okay. So we- let's go over the second poll.
Yes. Second poll is now.
So this question that's coming up now is.
This is the one that's meeting.
Oh, yeah, well, hopefully everybody's supposed to answer.
Yes.
Yes. We all want to be connected.
Yes. So I think since. So should we, want to, can everyone get specific cases?
So what we was doing before, we have a little bit of time, we started a little bit early. We're going to provide some other examples of how others have advocated within their communities. As I mentioned within the integrated course that I teach, I have students find an issue, do research on it, provide a recommendation and contact an elected official. One thing that I found was the hardest for them is to be concise. So when I first started teaching this course, we were doing like 25-page research paper. Nobody's reading it. So getting down to that 1-pager, and I know for those of you that watch the Advocacy 101 through 103 trainers, it's the importance of having a concise message, very direct, and get your point across. And so having either a 1-pager that really summarizes the issue, when we talk about contacting your elected officials, it's important that you realize that time is of the essence. If you're going to speak in front of any council or commission, a lot of times you'll have between 2 to 3 minutes. And you think of it like a commercial. You really, the attention spans are limited. You have to get in there, get the information. There might be after a meeting for small talk, but if you don't get their attention right off the bat, you're wasting your time. And you want to be able to have something that they're going to be able to take away from you.
it's really interesting what's going on for it because a lot of people are coming to these commission meetings. How do people know in advance, or what should they do to be like know what commission meetings are happening, when they are? Yeah, well, not necessarily online, in person, so they can show up because.
They find out when the
Oh, yeah.
commission meeting.
Is there any alerts that they can have, or do they have to just be looking at the website and getting newsletters or something?
I have to look it up, you know, I'll share it later, and we'll provide links as March for public meetings to kind of give you visible notices. So if you know that your city council, for example, meeting on Wednesday, for example, having that as a standing meeting, again, you may not be able to make it every time, but it's kind of keeping it on your radar. Before the meetings, reviewing the agenda.
Yeah.
Of course, things change. You know, things obviously don't always go according to the agenda, but at least kind of knowing what's kind of coming up and what's being discussed. And then when you're looking at the agenda, when possible, looking at the track record of how the government elected officials have voted for, have supported or opposed the particular. And when possible, knowing what oppositions that they have. So if you're coming there providing information, you are armed to be able to address any concerns and hopefully to have information that will help refute it and help you sway an opinion in another way.
Yeah, the city of Miami-Dade, for example, they have their commission meeting, so many agenda items, that it's 2 days. And then once we do their 911 system, so we have to get on their agenda to get it approved, you know, and pass, you know, for us to install the 911 systems, et cetera, you know, to keep everything safe and running. And they do bypass us if that's not a priority. They want to get through the agenda. I had to come back the next day. But it's also, unfortunately, it's comical because we got people coming up, talking to the podium. They have a lot of residents that come up to the podium. And the same residents every month. And you're like, okay, Mr. So-and-so, what can I do for you this month? And so they try not to make it funny, but everybody starts laughing because Mr. So-and-so is back up at the podium talking about how the bridge is still not fixed after 6 years, or the garbage truck is making too much noise in the morning. I mean, like just stuff that they could have written. But that's their priority. That's what they want to talk about.
But I'm gonna ask everybody, and when you're speaking here, for the people online, if you can speak loudly and quite clearly, and if you're far back, you might want to come a little bit closer here. Yeah. That's your microphone. Sam is posing there with the microphone, so you're all cognizant.
I just want to add to that, getting back to your point about people, because I live on Miami Beach, and one of the things is that the people that yell the loudest that come all the time, that's who they're listening to.
Yep.
And it's frustrating because you know that there are a lot of people that certain things that happen on the beach that do not believe in that, but they're following those people that are coming all the time and calling, and you know. I mean,
That's what's
yeah.
making it's true. Again, there's a loud voice in the deep voice.
Yeah.
It's kind of speaking out. That it does become a sense where they're gonna just the opinion that they're hearing. And so they respond because again, that's public where the public opinion is for.
Yes, I have a question. Can you expand on the public ability? So I know you have mentioned that the institute is open to the public. Can you expand on what aspects of it is open to the public, and as far as like what research is available to the public?
Absolutely. So, we're basically our focus on, so we have 3 components. So we have academic. So right now we have certificates, undergraduate and graduate, they're both open to degree and non-degree taking students. So we have a certificate in civic leadership and engagement, an undergraduate, and then a graduate version in public management certificate. So again, that's FIU student, degree or non-degree. We're also working on a micro-credential badge that'll be available to the general public as well. So that should be available next year. Within our academic, we have workshops, so even our generation civics that we have on campus, those are open to the public, so, people can come and attend those workshops. Hear from different elected officials and hear about the efforts that we're doing around those. Other thing with research, we partner with a lot of our other centers and institutes like the Metropolitan Center, which Dr. Maria David, which they're really the policy, the research think tank. So, providing information and sharing their resources. For example, next week, we're doing a cybersecurity webinar with the Metropolitan Center. Our other part is just it's community. It's partnering with amazing organizations like the Women's Fund to support, civic leadership and engagement, resilient infrastructure and social justice, which are really helpful.
So I'm gonna talk about something that I know that we can do, right? So the mayor is putting together her budget as we speak, right? Her proposed budget, because it's the commission budget for the county, right? So the mayor proposes it. And it's a good time now to give your input about something that you'd like to see there. But once it's ready, we're going to be going through it and looking at what things do support women and girls. We do know that we need additional funding for freedom from violence for the community, the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, for example, to have enough funding to be able to have ample domestic violence and human trafficking shelters, right? So we know that we are going to want to advocate to support that. We know that we're going to want to support for funding for early child learning centers. So my question to you all, and this is not to be embarrassing, how many of you know who your county commissioner is for your represents you? And if you don't, it's okay.
I don't live here, but my parents, I know.
For your parents. Okay. Agatha, where can people find out if they don't know who their county commissioner is?
Absolutely. The first place to go, I would say go to the county commission website. Google Miami-Dade County Commission. And then you'll pull up the thing. You'll be able to see based on your address. You'll be able to see the different districts. If you want to go even broader, just type in find my elected officials in Google. So then it'll break down, okay, so who's mayor, who's your, council members, whether, and here's the thing is, depending on where you live, whether your representatives are district elected or at large, which they represent, because again, there is different, sometimes they represent a small part of the community, in other cases, depending on where you live, they represent the entire community. So knowing that difference between your local municipality, whether you're in a city, town or village, the county, but then also, again, the state, and then federal. Know it at every area. Again, every election matters. And we're gonna have another one coming up. We're gonna soon be voting on a sheriff, which is a new elected official that county, the county residents haven't previously voted on. So it's important that we pay attention to every election, one locally, state, federal. Obviously, we know from voter turnout that too many just focus on the federal elections, the national elections. There are special elections now, of course, with some of the legislation requiring those who lobby to also resign from their positions. That has created openings. And again, things happen. So these special elections, when they do come in, don't ignore them.
So I'll also ask the people online to answer this. How many of you would be willing to call or to visit or to write your commissioner about something line item in the budget this year? And everybody online, we're going to ask you to please put it in the chat if you are. I'm going to ask if we could just make sure before you leave today to let us know, because our team will be in touch. It can be, a little bit intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. And that prequel really influences the outcome. Very exciting, actually, because not that many people show up, right? And you don't even have to be a super squeaky wheel. If there are quite a few of us wheels of the bus, right, they're likely to add. I know that every year for the last 3 years, I've spoken in front of the county commission with other board members and committee members. And when we say that we've got 8,000 people on our email database, every single commissioner sits up straight and listens. It's a thing. There's so many people online. Christie House, Overtown Youth Center, Malia from League for Ladies is here. There are people from United Way. I saw all kinds of amazing people. Your networks are powerful. Just think if we added up the database for United Way, United Women, plus the Women's Fund, plus if FEMA Gibson is on, Girls Inc. That's a lot of folks. So if we're all willing to speak up, we can partner on more than one thing. So Malia from Leap, for example, Malia, do you want to actually come up here? Do you want to tell everybody what happened last year in the budget for you? Malia,
We have someone online with someone has their hand up.
oh, has something, okay, we'll have Malia and then there,
Priscilla.
and then Priscilla, okay? Oh, there you go. Wow.
So I sort of feel like Nina wrote here, which is. She's the executive director for the Miami-Dade Women's Commission, but she used to work for us, I mean, it's for desperately. So she's actually an integral part of our story. We took the Women's Advocacy 101 and we literally, with like a recipe, we did exactly what they said. Nina helped, I felt like we were organizing the truth. She helped to organize it where we serve women transitioning from prison. So we're a nonprofit that's fortunate that the people we serve are in our community, they're visible, and we can bring them to events, and we do. So for the budget hearing, and we're very last minute, we were not in the budget at all. Nobody had thought of us. And again, we had organized, we had members of our board, we had our ladies, all in their t-shirts in the front row. And they have compelling stories. Again, we planned it, so each one who got up to talk emphasized a different point, so they weren't up there repeating the same thing over and over. We had a script, we practiced, we were prepared, and they got up there and they had very compelling stories, they're very articulate. And we ended up, we've never gotten any government funding from anywhere. And we got $200,000. It's gotten so they, like, when we show up there, they're like, we know, can you just put one person up there? We're very visible. They know us. When we showed up, again, we followed the recipe. We showed up for the budget hearing. We followed up with emails, try to schedule as many meetings as possible. And then we went to go say thank you. And then we actually got a call from the county, one of the commissioners beg us not to all show up in mass and say thank you. You can just, but it is a testament to the power of this, to be real, but we had just, they're complaining kind of all up. But again, we do good work, the women have compelling stories, they're beautiful, they get up there, they're authentic. And they can be annoyed because there's so many of us, but I guarantee if I went up there and said, I'm the executive director for League, please give us money, they would be tuned out. But when they get up there, that women with compelling stories, talking from the heart in mass, they just couldn't ignore us. And so I'm kind of very sensitive to being cringy, I don't want to be a nuisance, but my lesson there is it's okay to be a little bit of a nuisance. Because if you're quiet and polite, they're just not willing to listen. So again, we just had a game plan. Again, I thank Nina so much because she really spearheaded that for us. And then of course, really our women sold, they're our best salespeople. So they did. In fact, I don't come to one of these things without bringing somebody that we serve. They're all very committed. So if you see me, you always see one of our graduates because they're amazing. So leveraging resources on behalf of women and girls. So this organization and Miami-Dade
Commission for Women. I see several representatives here. Thank you for being here. We all exist, so all of these organizations get their services leveraged. FEMA's organization, Amanda's organization, Christy has all of these organizations benefit from you being strong. So if you won't do it, and we do sometimes have this issue as women, you're not willing to show up and go to your own doctor's appointment, but you're willing to get a doctor's appointment for the rest of your family members, and consider this a doctor's appointment for the women and girls in your community when you establish the relationship with your commissioners and beyond. So we'll go to Priscilla, right? Thank you. Anything else? You've answered the question. Is there anybody else online who'd like to? Can you tell me, team, if there's anybody who wants to be? Who's that?
No one has their hand up.
No one has their hand up? Okay.
I just want to share a really easy list for folks too. So in
Want to come here?
no, but I wasn't.
I would expect to family, I'm sure.
So I'm Jonah Ralston Cocker with Miami YFC. And I'm also on the
What's
board of
Miami YFC?
Miami for Christ. We've been in the community for 75 years, providing services for ages 11 to 19. And then I also serve, since Tina is on here, I'd be remiss if I didn't say I also serve on the board of Together for Children, which is a group of neighborhood coalitions dedicated to stopping youth violence. So this is on a personal note though, in 2017, I moved similar to what you're describing having in Coconut Grove. I moved from South Miami City proper to South Miami unincorporated. And I could not figure out where to vote, and I couldn't figure out where to find information. And so I changed my voter registration to mail-in voting just because I was like, I don't want to miss a ballot. And I've never changed it because I don't have a near perfect voting record because every ballot comes to my house. So I don't miss an election. And if you feel insecure about voting at home and doing it in the mail, you can still take the ballot and drop it off on the day of the election. So you don't even have to vote at home if you don't feel comfortable with that. But I found that was a super easy lift for folks who want to get more involved and want your voice to be heard. Just register to get the ballot at home, and then you can still vote however you like. But at least then you won't miss elections. So that's
Brilliant. So Art, you want to come up here with your question? And while Art is coming up, let me tell you all that legislation has changed. So to be able to vote by mail, you have to renew and sign up for every single election. That is been cited in a way to curtail people's ability to vote. You're not near a poll, if you're disabled, if you work 3 jobs and so you can't get off to go to the polls. Mail-in ballots are a way to facilitate access, and that's being curtailed at the time. You have to sign up every single time. If you have questions about that, please, actually, Megan and team, can you please post in our chat what you have to do to sign up for your mail-in ballots? And spread the word, talk about things that they're partying with your family and your networks. That's how we make a difference.
Okay, so it's not a question, it's a challenge to all of you, since we're all here and everybody online. First, everybody online, I want you to put what you're interested in, what you advocate for, what your organization is about, and your contact information. And because we're here not only to learn, we're here to get to know each other. And networking is about meeting people and making friends, really, not about what we can do. But now, since we're here about advocacy, I'm challenging everybody to meet one person here in person and here online that you follow up with and set like a Zoom or a lunch to talk about the issues to get to know each other just as people. But then to talk about the issues that you're here for and what you want to advocate on, because again, it's not only our single voice, it's our voices together. So let's just get to know each other and make one new friend today. Put your information, especially for the people on virtual, if you're not getting out of this challenge, everybody put your information in the chat and then message them, get their information and send them an email or DM them in the chat.
So For you online, so many of you have done that. I did ask before if you talk about a specific case that you're advocating for. If you haven't done, please do. Please do. And any specific questions that you have, we are going to take a 10-minute physical break here. So online people, what I do when I'm taking a break from a meeting, I put a 9-minute little timer, right? So set yourself in a little alarm and we'll be back here at 20 minutes after 10. And we'll be starting again and really interesting. We've got a great leader from the state, a former elected representative. So we'll see you in 10, in 9. What a luxury. Not only do we have an expert and an incredible attorney who's going to introduce herself more, but somebody who's the lived experience of an elected official, just as Vicky Lopez, who's now serving as an elected official, did Advocacy 101, 102, and 103. Ellyn is here to join us virtually, very busy person, to give us a very unique perspective and with a special focus on state advocacy. So Ellyn, 1,000 thanks for being here. Please take it away.
Okay, I'll do my best. I'm not real good on self-promotion, but I started out in my career in the insurance business and got involved in a lot of community events, including organizations like the Children's Home Society, etc. I sold my insurance firm and got involved in politics. I did a lot of campaigns, and I also managed a number of nonprofits, including the Women's Chamber of Commerce. We did a huge $1 million grant on taking women from welfare to work. And also, I actually ran the statewide association for preschools, which is, I know, an issue of interest to your group, which are the early learning centers, for 6 years. That was one of my clients. Went back to law school after I had my 3 kids, and the year that I graduated was the year that I was elected to the Florida House. So I served in the Florida House and I served in the Florida Senate, and basically went into the private sector in 2012. I currently serve, which is another interest area that you have, as the chair of the direct support organization for the statewide council on human trafficking, which is chaired by Ashley Moody. We are the fundraising arm for the council, and we take our, kind of our directives from the council for the issues that they want to fund and work on. And the focus is educating and also providing technology to law enforcement to combat human trafficking. So that's kind of what I do right now in terms of my community service. Among other things, I do a lot of pro bono work in Tallahassee as well for a number of nonprofits. So that's kind of my background, and the perspective I hope to give you today is one from somebody who served and who was lobbied a lot, not only by professional lobbyists, but by advocates. The do's and the don'ts and how you can make the most impact. I used to have some groups come in, maybe, like the Junior League or the League of Women Voters, that had a laundry list of issues and telling, us how they wanted us to vote on particular bills that they were tracking. I think an important thing to do, but not always very effective, to be honest with you. I can give you a couple of stories where I will tell you that I took on an issue that I never intended to, but I had an advocate who was relentless and wanted to make sure that what they cared about was on my radar. The first one is this young woman appeared when I was campaigning, and she kept volunteering. And by the way, a great way to get to know people, right? Because at the end of the day, you're the advocate. Somebody else has to push that button. Somebody else has to file legislation or take that vote. So as an advocate, she just kept showing up and volunteering and walking with me in the neighborhoods and all kinds of things. And I finally she made her way to, walking next to me. And I said, who are you and why are you volunteering? Why do you care about my campaign? And she said that, you are a business person and you're going to understand this. And she was an advocate for, believe it or not, the film tax credits. I know it's probably an obscure issue, right? But it's a business issue. And I like, what's your interest? She goes, well, a lot of people don't like the tax credits for the film industry, but I need to explain to you who I am and how I make my living. And she was a hairstylist and a makeup artist and people who worked in the back room. And she shared with me all of the people who make their living off of the film industry. And when films come to town, how they're able to stay in their homes and not have to travel all over the country, chasing films. But when you have a film credit program, the films come to Florida and they all get to be employed. So it was a perspective I didn't have, right? I only had the tax perspective. It wasn't a perspective I had. Ultimately became finance and tax chair, and I became the champion for tax film credits against the advice of staff, because they always said that, the film industry, they just follow the tax credits. They don't set up long-term. But we had Miami Vice for a long time. We had some shows for a long time, but it was about servicing an industry. And she made herself a fixture, not only in my campaigns, but in my office. And she was always in touch with me. And that was one who basically decided, for her own personal reasons, nobody was asking her to do this. She wanted to stay in South Florida. She wanted to make sure that she could do that and raise her kids there. And she wanted to do it in the film industry. So I was pretty impressed with what she had done. The other one's probably a little bit more intense. I don't know how this woman reached me. She called the governor's office and she said her son had just committed suicide. He was bullied relentlessly, and she started doing a lot of research. And there's, I guess, a website called Bully Police USA in Florida had an F. They did ABCDEF. And she was determined to change the laws in Florida on bullying. I think it was the governor's office then, at that time it was Jeb Bush, who said, well, maybe you should call Ellyn Bogdanoff. She was involved in education and she cares about those issues. So she called me and we got to talking and she was sharing her story. It was an issue that I probably would not have gotten involved in. And I ended up caring about the issue in large part because of her story. And she, made sure that she came to Tallahassee often. She lived on the west coast of Florida. She came to visit me. We had lunch several times. And again, another determined woman who was not going to let the issue go until she saw some results. So we ended up, I actually drafted a bill with staff, put a lot of detail into it, put a lot of thought into it, did a lot of research for it, as well as she did too, giving me her laundry list of things that she thought were important and why it was important. And we ended up passing the bill. Believe it or not, it took 3 years. I don't know why things take that long sometimes, but they do. So patience is a virtue in this business. And we went from an app to basically the model bill for the nation. Several other states had copied the bill before we even passed it. And we received like an A+ from Bully Police USA. We named the bill after her son, which she got to see it pass, which is very cool. Being passionate is important. Caring about your issue and not being too diverse, because I'm watching some of the comments here. And I know a lot of people want to go out and they want to advocate for a bunch of different things. But I'll give you an example about where sometimes you can have too much action and it ends up creating difficulty. So because I've worked in the space of human trafficking, there was a task force that came together. They start working on bills. But what happens is there was nobody really leading the charge. So everybody kind of went out into their space and they came up with a lot of different ideas and they were advocating for different priorities. And it became, unfortunately, a little confusing for the members. My client had asked me to take all of the bills, put them in bill drafting, and then we would try to figure out who the best sponsors were. But some of the other members of the task force had also contacted and released some of the language to other members, and it became mass chaos. Because once you put a bill into bill drafting, the first person who puts it into bill drafting gets to have that issue. And everybody else is blocked unless that member releases. So it became a little bit of the Keystone Cops. A lot of the I would say momentum was lost. You know, each advocate had different priorities, so everybody wasn't singing from the same song sheet in terms of what they wanted to pass, which, you know, is very confusing to a legislature, right? If they think a group is together, like they come together as a group, and you are the human trafficking task force, they anticipate that there's going to be a talking sheet, right? That people are all going to be from the same page, and that wasn't happening. So ultimately, one of the members who I worked with basically took the bull by the horns, created a committee bill, and put in that bill what they wanted. So a lot of the issues, other than one, I think there were like 5 issues, only one of the 5 passed. Now, there were a number of reasons for it, because I would say to people is like, you really need to know who your audience is. So if you're going to advocate in Tallahassee, number one, I think it's important to build relationships and to know who's passionate about what issues. Now, you can make somebody passionate about an issue that they don't already have on their radar, but you can also find out who's interested. So for instance, Fiona McFarland is interested in early childhood. She's taken the lead along with Aaron Brawl. Those are the 2 big leaders in the early learning world right now. And Aaron was it when she was in the House. And I still work in that space. I'm general counsel, and I do a lot of administrative law for child care centers, simply because I have a significant background in it. And one of the things, you know, they're trying to do is create consistency in certain aspects of the law. And I approached, Representative McFarland to say, would you work with me on this? And she was very anxious to work on it. So it's sometimes finding the right person who has a passion in that area, connecting with them, sharing your story, and making sure that you are on their radar and you're one of their go-to people. So one of the things that I did as a member is I always wanted people back home who weren't paid to lobby me, right, to give me the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because very often as a member, you have 30 seconds to make a decision, especially when somebody files an amendment on a bill, right? Yes, I will put the names of the representatives in the chat. As far as, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. It's going to be very hard for me to read the chat and answer questions, so I don't know if there's another way to do it that might make more sense, because otherwise I'll go off on a tangent. So I always looked for somebody back home who would help me make a decision that I trusted, that wasn't getting necessarily paid to do it. So one of the first bills I had to do with, a medical issue, nurse anesthetist versus anesthesiologist assistants, and it was like a big food fight in Tallahassee. And I played tennis with a nurse anesthetist. So I called her up and I said, Barbara, give me the good, the bad, the ugly. Give me the cliff notes. I got 30 seconds to make a decision. I trust her, right? So it's building that trust with someone so that when you bring an issue to them, that not only do they see you as a tremendous resource, but the information you give them is solid. And when I do that for folks on an issue, and I do it as a lobbyist, because I only know I kind of have a disadvantage. I only know how to conduct myself, because I never want to throw a member under the bus, is to tell them what the other side is going to say. And I know y'all think that something like human trafficking, everybody wants to end it. Everybody wants to make sure that we do something significant. But I will tell you that, when you talk to some of the members, they don't fully understand, right? And it's trying to give them a perspective that they may not understand. So just to get an example, I was working on a bill in the state of Florida years ago, if you all remember roofies, that if somebody intentionally spiked your drink or whatever, it became a felony if you were sexually assaulted. But we don't have voluntary incapacitation in Florida. We only have involuntary incapacitation. Well, you can still be incapacitated, and if you do it to yourself, it doesn't mean that you're asking. It's like the old deal we used to deal with in court where, her skirt was too short, so she deserved what she got. Don't kid yourself. There's still some of that attitude out there, because one of the members said to me, well, if she didn't want to get incapacitated and drunk, she shouldn't have gone to a bar. So understand that you really need to understand where people are coming from and kind of talk their language. Right now, I think you all are aware that we have a super majority in the Florida House, the Florida Senate. We have a Republican governor. So pretty much, the buzzwords are very different when you're an R versus when you're a D. Politics matters. This is not local government where probably less is about partisanship than it is in Tallahassee. I just moderated a panel this morning. I had a Republican, I had a Democrat, and I had a news reporter. So it was kind of interesting to see the dynamics. And sometimes you have to change your messaging. And I always used to say to people, never walk into a member's office and say, do it because it's the right thing to do. It doesn't work. It's always the right thing to do, but people in Tallahassee live in the world of politics. And once in a while, you'll get those people who believe it's the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, it's always about politics. So it's about fine-tuning your message, knowing who your audience is, being able to relate to them on a level that they can connect with, right? And if they have an interest, because you walk into members' offices and you'll talk about maybe human trafficking, or you'll talk about early childhood, they have no interest. You're wasting your time, right? There's no interest there. They might vote on a bill in a certain way. Some of the biggest challenges I had was, believe it or not, in the early learning world. There's a really diverse thought process about how to approach it. And it was some of the most aggravating. And, you would think everybody is supportive of early learning, right? Especially when you get into school readiness and you want to make sure that those that can't afford it are ready for kindergarten. And let me tell you, it was years. We didn't get extra money. Nobody seemed to care. There were staffers that were entrenched in the House and the Senate who believed it should only be for babysitting. There was no value in, the early learning component, that, they needed to come from the home. So, you fight divergent thoughts too. So, because they were around when it was kind of like a workforce issue, like give people money so they can have their kids babysat so that they can go to work, right? That was the initial attitude. And some of that's still around in Tallahassee. So it's fighting that. I mean, we've seen a lot of money come in recent years, but that wasn't always the case. And it wasn't that long ago. I mean, we were fighting this in 2015 and 16. So, I give you a couple of examples of things that I've lived with. I would say it's most elected officials, if not all, have attention deficit disorder by election. So when you go in, it's, you've got to have your elevator speech. Like what you have an issue, it's important to you. What's your 30-second pitch so that you can get their attention? The best time to advocate is not when they're in session. The best time to advocate is when they're campaigning, when they're on the street, when they're back in their districts. And I always say to people, if you really want to make a difference on an issue, is volunteer, volunteer in their campaign, or hold a meet and greet with a lot of your advocates so you can talk to them about an issue that's important to you. So those are all really important things that, I feel like, to be an effective advocate, especially in Tallahassee, where you're bombarded by thousands of issues, which ones rise to the top, and be very specific. If you're making broad statements like, I support the end to human trafficking. Well, everybody supports that, right? So you got to make sure that you're very pointed and you're very specific, and that you have an ask. What's your ask? Because I think a lot of members, there are some that will cut to the chase. And I used to do it all the time. Tell me what you need me to do. Tell me what you want from me. And when I said that to Mrs. Johnston, whose son Jeff had committed suicide, she said, I want to make sure this doesn't happen to another child. I want to put tough laws. The school district didn't do anything and they knew my son was being bullied. I want to force them to do it. So I had to create a hammer. So one of the things I put in the bill was that if you fail to address the concern of a parent with this, and you had to have a system in order to address it, and you had to keep the parent informed as to what you were doing, you would lose your safe school dollars. You would lose money. Well, that doesn't look good for elected officials. So, you know, if you use that hammer to say you're going to lose money if you don't take care of the children, and I don't care who these children are, then, you know, you're going to have a problem. And by the way, I had some challenges with the bill because there were interest groups that came in and wanted me to categorize children. They wanted to put categories like, you know, you need to protect a child if they are, you know, gay or transgender or this. And I said, wait a minute. I said, the bill says that you will protect all children regardless of their status under the law. I said, because once you put in categories, what you're saying is Jeff's life was worth less than maybe another child because they happen to be part of a minority group. Jeff had no category. He was just a kid that another kid picked on relentlessly until he couldn't take it anymore. So, you know, I felt I had the right approach. I wasn't excluding anybody. I was holding the districts accountable. So, but, you know, what held it up for 3 years, believe it or not, were some of the interest groups. It was like, if I can't get it my way, I would rather do what I can to try to kill a bill. So, I think, you know, that in itself, you have to know who you're, I know sometimes you would think you don't have, I don't want to say enemies, but opposers of what you're trying to do because it's good stuff. But believe it or not, they're out there. They're out there and they have a different perspective, or maybe they want to put the money somewhere else. But, you know, I work with a lot of my clients, especially in the nonprofit world. And I tell them that, you know, the first thing, I just had a call yesterday. He says, how do I go about this? And I said, the first thing you need to do is start building relationships. Somebody needs to care about what you do. So if you file an appropriation, that they're going to advocate and push hard for, and it's going to be a priority for them. Because with, you know, 3,000 bills being filed on an average year in Tallahassee, how do you break through the noise? How do you make sure that your issue, and remember one other thing about government, it's incremental. It's incremental, and you take it one step at a time, and it may take you 5 years to reach your overall goal, but if you make incremental change, you've done a lot, especially in the world of Tallahassee. So that's my pitch. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have. You tell me. I don't see any questions there. I don't know if anybody's in the audience.
We do have, can you repeat the names of the legislators who care a lot about early?
Yes.
Learning?
So Fiona McFarland is one that she has been kind of taking the lead in the House on early childhood, and Aaron Grawl in the Senate.
And maybe we could, maybe the team can get those and type those in the chat as well. I'm going to see if there are any more questions from there. I'd like to talk about the early learning, but we've got first question here. We're using this is a microphone.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay. Can you talk to your representatives? It's hard to talk hearing that, but that are not where you don't live. So I'm back and forth between Central Florida because my parents live there. So I want to talk to some representatives there. So can I do that and talk to them? And
so Mrs. Johnston lived.
oh wait, now we can hear them. Yeah.
Mrs. Johnston lived in Fort Myers.
That's what I was.
Yeah, she came to me because Jeb Bush told her that I might be the one to help her. And it didn't matter to me because the issue was a statewide issue, right? Now, if it's something specific to the district, obviously you want to talk to. So for instance, I deal with the nonprofits. I represent the Jewish Federations of Florida. And there's like, you know, if you have the JFS in Broward, their constituency is Broward County. So, who do they build relationships with? Well, you're going to build them. There are exceptions to the rule, right? Because somebody cares about an issue, whether maybe it's a museum of some sort, like a veterans museum, you go to a veteran, etc. Especially if it has statewide appeal. But, the issue might be specific to the members. So for instance, for human trafficking, Representative Steele has been tremendous. Representative Hawkins has been tremendous. Toby Overdorf is a true champion. So, they're in different areas of the state, but they care about human trafficking. So it doesn't have to be in your district. Appropriations are more specific,
Yep.
but issues really, like for instance, I was dealing with a puppy mill issue, and Linda Cheney is, she loves, dogs, and when I was talking to her about it, she goes, "I want to run that bill," right? So it wasn't in Broward or Palm Beach County, which is where I predominantly live. It was she lives in the west coast of Florida, so it's issue specific. So
Okay, so they're open to speaking. They're not going to ask if you're a constituent of that area. So they're open to speaking to whoever.
They might ask what the issue is, and if they don't have an issue in it, if they don't have an interest in the issue, and you don't live in their district, it might be difficult to get an appointment because there's a lot of demands on their time. But again, you got to do your homework, right? So you look at the bills that they filed. The easiest thing to do is look at the bills that they filed, kind of get to know their personalities, and they might. They might.
Thank you.
Ellen, if you could maybe type the names that we just mentioned also in the chat, it would be terrific. While I go ahead and ask you the next question. You mentioned a couple of. Okay. I won't put in. I'm not going to put in Hawkins because Hawkins is leaving the legislature. He's being appointed to the commission. Somebody else is coming in, and that's the other challenge you have. It's term limits. They turn over like hotcakes. So I'm going to go ahead and ask one of the questions that here is in the chat, and this is from Muffy Barbaron at FIU. Thank you, Ellen, for your years of leadership and work. Do you care to share what you're doing today to help your causes? Well, yeah, I mean, look, I was a foster parent. I'm an adoptive parent. I was a guardian ad litem. So children's issues are very close to my heart. I do some pro bono work for some of the agencies. I've been the pro bono lobbyist for the Ability Center that's run by JAFCO. They provide respite care for parents of autistic children. So, I do that. And, I am the chair of the DSO. So I work in the human trafficking space. I have a 9-year-old. I volunteer whenever I can in the school. So I try. I mean, it's, a single mother raising a 9-year-old. I'll be honest with you, I don't have as much time as I used to. And, there's demands on my time with my clients. I have to take care of my clients. But, any opportunity that I get in the early learning space, I'm still in it trying to make the laws better for childcare centers. We're trying to create consistency. We have some, they get whacked with administrative fines and stuff like that for minor stuff. So I'm going to be working hopefully with Fiona McFarland to try to create consistency among all of the counties. So all of them are treated the same. So I try to stay in the spaces that are comfortable for me. But I do a lot of the business world too. I have a tax specialty, so I end up with a lot of tax issues. But it's I volunteer where I can, and I do pro bono when I can. Thank you. So we have a question. The Women's Fund has returned to grant making, as I think you know. We're looking at system now. So some of our grantees are here. We're working with Overtown Children and Youth. We're working with FUM and Familias and others. One of our grantee cohorts is putting together a Empowering Early Learning Educators Coalition. So they are meeting on a monthly basis. owner operators and directors, trying to bring together the voices of those who are in the trench. What would be your advice to that group, that growing coalition of how to best address, in this case, state legislature?
You know, I know there was a lot of money thrown at the early learning centers. I mean, I know that from, you know, a lot of the people that used to serve on my board, and, you know, a lot of my clients. And there was no accountability attached to it, which was a little disturbing on my end. I mean, you know, I'm a free market Republican, but when you give a private entity, the money should technically go for, you know, hopefully to pay the employees, get a more educated, better employee in these centers, because that's some of the biggest challenge. You know, I did a lot in human resource, and I used to have a saying that your first customer is your employee. How you treat your employee is how they're going to treat the customer. So you have to invest in your employees. They're also your biggest risk, because no childcare center ever injured a child, or I can't tell you how many of them leave them on the playground or in a car. It was not done by the owner, it was done by the employees. So the biggest thing is how do you effectively invest, you know, get that advocacy group to talk about investing in the staff and the employees so that they can better serve the children. You know, there's a lot of groups. I know there's a lot of different advocacy groups. I don't know if is your space out of Dade County?
Yes.
Okay, and it's an independent group of the ELC?
Yes, correct. Although the ELC speak like every third month as invited speakers, they speak very closely. They work closely with the Children's Trust as well, but it is independent, yes.
You know, it really depends on what their overall, I would have, you know, I'd have to ask a lot more questions, like what's your goal? You know, what's your purpose of meeting? You know, it all, you know, I would say to people, if you want to understand politics, you just need to follow the money. You know, so when the money was there and they gave it, nobody, even the PPP money, you know, the money from that came because of COVID, where did the money go? Did it end up in the hands of the employees? You know, what do they need? I mean, the individuals, the directors, you know, the staff, what do they need to do a better job? And then from there, kind of create this laundry list of things that need to be done to try to improve it. I mean, the number one thing that we always dealt with was the wages, you know, the educational background, providing, you know, the professional development, which UF does a pretty good job at, right? The Lassiter Center, or what you know, how do we put more money in the hands of these teachers so that, you know, they can actually stay in the field. So, you know, the institutional knowledge, the experience matters. Experience matters. It's, you know, we're having obviously an employment crisis to begin with, and they're generally low paying jobs. So you need to get more money in their hands.
And just on that same topic, before we go on to the next question, do you think it's necessary to have a lobbyist to support something like the idea of having early child educators be considered essential workers? Do you feel like something that is this nature is that needs a paid lobbyist?
You know, I will tell you this, unless you have somebody who is willing to devote the time, the energy, and the resources to being the voice. What I do as a lobbyist, I would say to people, I'm not a hired gun. I'm a strategist, and I help you navigate the system, right? And I get it. So because it is foreign to most people. So if you're fortunate enough to have somebody who is a volunteer and a good voice and willing to travel to Tallahassee to deliver that message, then no, you don't need one. But if you're trying to accomplish something in the crazy, chaotic world of session, sometimes a paid lobbyist is going to help you move the issue. Can also give you the intel. You know, a lot of times I give the intel to my clients to say, this issue, I mean, I had it happen with with the human trafficking. I think a lot of the advocates, very passionate, and everybody wanted to do the right thing, don't get me wrong. But they failed to understand that nobody was doing anything in the human trafficking space without running it by the AG's office. The AG is the go-to on human trafficking. And when you have a Republican legislature and a Republican cabinet, right? They're going to protect their own, right? They want their opinion. So all of the legislation was run by the AG. That's stuff that an advocate may not know. That's kind of inside baseball. So if you're fortunate enough to have somebody who does inside baseball or can take the lead on something, or a member, you know, a Vicky Lopez. I mean, she would be a great advocate for you. But it just depends, you know, what you want to accomplish.
Thank you very much. Any other questions here before we go on?
This is really a comment you presented, I think, examples earlier, in the sense of having strength in numbers, but also having a unique voice. They mentioned showing up with 100 speakers, which we're saying the same thing over and over. So having that collective voice, but also having an individual story, like examples that you gave of the parent that was impacted, is very extra help.
So I'll go on to the next question there. Ellyn, you talked about buzzwords. So it's very clear. You talked about a supermajority. What the Women's Fund and most of the organizations, they're incredible organizations that have been joining us today, are nonpartisan. We're issue oriented and cause driven, right? And you do have every single opinion in the rainbow within people who work closely with us. So as we're looking to advocate now for many issues, in our specific case, that benefit women and girls, as a strategy, what are some of those buzzwords first that you think that we can
Here's what I'm going to tell you, and this is just, you know, my personal opinion. Nothing's nonpartisan, right? There are certain issues that are tagged with one party or another, right? Pro-life, pro-choice, right? For years, early learning was seen as a Democratic issue. All of the Democrats ran the bills. It was always seen as a Democratic issue. So I think what you have to do is kind of understand the nature of, you know, what drives people. So I'll give you a good example that's not related to your world, but give you a perspective. The International Yacht Brokers Association is in my district, right? It was in my district. And they came to me and said, we are losing the entire industry. The boat manufacturers, everybody's moving out of state and they're going to North Carolina and other states because they have a tax credit. And the maximum charge on a yacht is like $350 or whatever it was. And what happened is it was always seen as a tax break for the rich, right? But again, they didn't see the underlying issue of what the industry meant. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry to the state of Florida. So what I ended up doing, and I went to the press and I made it a nonpartisan issue. I made it an economic issue, and I had to get rid of that label, tax break to the rich, because the assumption is if people could afford a yacht, they can afford the tax. But that's what wasn't about. We were losing our manufacturers because you're rich, but you're rich because you don't overpay for things, right? So they would rather go to North Carolina and purchase the same multi-million-dollar yacht and save on the tax. And we were losing people who did the provisions, the people who did upholstery, the repair shops, all of the people that serve that industry, right? The same for the entertainment. It took me 3 years. I did a round. I went to all of the news, to the editorial boards when newspapers mattered, right? So I went to all the editorial boards and I finally got an endorsement from the Sun Sentinel that this was a good thing. And we passed the tax cap on yachts. and the industry came back. It's the second largest economic impact of the state of Florida today, right? The yachting industry. We are the yachting capital of the world. So I think that if you look at what the message is, what the history of the message is, and how do we change it, right? So when choice and education and school readiness and all of that, we changed kind of like the approach of how you go about that issue. You know, because I think a lot of the, you know, mental health is another one, you know, nobody wanted to talk about it, right? Sometimes it takes, you know, some things to happen to understand that it needs to, you know, needs to move forward. So when you talk, it depends on the issue for the buzzwords, right? I think, you know, you get some pushback sometimes for the agriculture industry on the human trafficking because they're afraid they're going to get caught up in all of that. So I think it's knowing all of the players, knowing what the history of the issue is, admitting the fact that it could be seen as a Democrat or Republican issue, then knowing what the political climate is and what words, and that's part of the strategy that I work with my client. What words do I need to be using so that I don't shut people down, right? And that's key. It's, you know, people have to see past the initial speech. My father always had a saying, he was a sales manager, and he always used to tell his salesmen, a little old fashioned, but my dad's 93, that you never offend anybody by not having a beard. You may offend some people if you do. So he never liked his salesmen to have beards. And there's a saying, was like, you got to get past the first impression. You got to get past the elevator speech and not making it a partisan issue. So words matter a lot, and they matter a lot in Tallahassee. So I can't give you specifics unless, you know, we could talk about an issue at length and you kind of delve into the history and why it was always perceived as a Democrat or Republican issue.
Mark Needle here from
I have a question. Is urban an issue in Tallahassee right now? It feels like there's you know, we're an urban area, and if we are building an issue that is really responsive to our diverse urban issue, is there an undercurrent of animosity towards urban Florida that we need to know about and need to figure out how to make it make issues non-urban in order to avoid triggering?
Well, it depends on what it is. I'm going to be perfectly frank with you. A lot of what we did in Tallahassee was because something happened in Miami-Dade County. So, you know, when you're a big, diverse community, a lot happens, and it also triggers. In South Florida in general, sometimes triggers legislation. I used to call it, you know, headline legislation, knee-jerk legislation, where, you know, one thing happens and we turn the world upside down, and we're not thoughtful. I don't think there's anything deliberate going on, and a lot has to depend on who the leadership is. I mean, you have Paul Renner in the House. I mean, he was a Broward guy at one point. He lives in, you know, the Jacksonville area, so it's not like he's, you know, he's living in rural Florida. And Kathleen Pasadomo lives in Naples, you know, on the water. So I don't think there is. It just depends on the issue. Are you thinking in something particular? I think there's a natural skepticism that a lot of Florida has about South Florida, right? I used to have a lot of like when we were talking about citizens rates, insurance rates one time, I had a member come to me from the Panhandle and said, why should I pay for the fact that you guys want to live on the water and on the coast? And I said, well, you're a fiscally constrained county. We're the producers of the revenue. I'm a donor county. I said, why should I? And I represented Broward and Palm Beach. I said, why should I give my money back to the state to spend in other parts of the state? I said, we're a state, we share. And if you overburden the citizens of South Florida, you won't have the revenue coming to help pay for your schools and your roads and all the things that you can't afford to pay for because you don't have the population. So I think there is a natural tendency to feel like we here in South Florida are a little hoggish, right? But we have the population, and we also are a big driver of the economy. So I think it's, it's a double-edged sword, but, a lot of what happens is, it comes back to South Florida. A lot of the legislation, we're doing this because they cite instances, and it's South Florida. So I don't think it's if you could give me an example of the issue that you're thinking of, where you felt like there was a prejudice, I could probably give you more feedback.
Well, I know that there's a lot of battling that seems to be going on between local control used to be really a Republican belief, and now there's a strong belief about state control over local control and doing things the same way rather than deferring to home rule and local innovation in governance. So it seems to me that this is all part of the same dynamic that's going on, and that somehow our advocacy needs to be sensitive to these kinds of things. So yeah, but I'm just looking at it as an observer, not an insider.
You're not wrong. Preemption's become kind of a new buzzword. Deregulation and preemption. They don't want to regulate a lot of like professions, and that's always been the case. Deregulation, more people to the market, more people should do it. What about credentials? We want to make the doctors a free market. If you can, you got a knife, you can do surgery. Meaning, I think what government has to, here's what I would tell you. If you could focus everything on the issue of public safety, right? So I believe government's first and foremost role is the safety of the public, right? That's why we have a military, et cetera. It's the safety of the citizens. If you can relate an issue to public safety and come from that vantage point, you can make a dent. Because, the current legislature is very pro law enforcement, very pro public safety. And that's why, the whole thing on human trafficking, it's a public safety issue, right? So I think, because I have an issue I've been struggling with, and I keep hearing dereg, and I keep talking about, protecting the public safety, because that is government's key role. And I think a lot of people are open to those arguments. So if you can relate your issue to public safety and come from that angle, I think you got a winner.
That is huge advice. That's huge advice. Very active in the human trafficking and domestic violence space. Even a lot of people who've been online. You've got a lot of people, the Domestic Violence Coalition and Human Trafficking Coalition here today, Ellyn. So that's actually huge advice. And when those economies grow, the nefarious and the unregulated economies grow, they're the most difficult to control. Well, so those are huge tips for us. And Agatha, you had a question.
Yeah, we talked obviously a lot about how we can influence, we can advocate. Any advice for those who are considering running for office, and any guidance? We saw there from the poll, obviously, that underrepresented, but advice to perhaps encourage more.
Well, if you're thinking of running for office, know what you're getting into. That's number one. I think that it depends on what office. I think you need to be involved. I think you need to have the right resume. And you need to really understand what it's going to take. I think a lot of people don't realize, what it takes to run for public office. Your life is no longer your own. I'm a Republican. I live in Broward and lived in Palm Beach County, and I was one of very few. So everything that I said or did usually was a front page headline. Your life is really not your own. And it's hard work to get elected. Hard work. I'm a big grassroots. That's how I started. Big grassroots advocate. I started in the education system, and we made a lot of significant changes to the public schools in Broward County through our advocacy. And that's when I was recruited to run for office, because I had the background, I was a business person, I had the networks. You need to be prepared to run for office, and you need to understand the time commitment and have the resume that will impress people. Because I think as a campaign consultant, I always used to say my biggest job was finding a good candidate. My job was a lot easier. If you have a bad candidate, it's why I stopped doing it. I couldn't run an election for a bad candidate. I did it once and swore I'd never do it again. So it's really hard to make a living when you have an attitude at campaign consulting.
Four questions that are for issues that the Women's Fund has that might appear to be especially partisan. Is it recommended that we actively look and just sort of take that bull by the horns and look for declared Republicans who are in favor of the issue that we're advocating for? Is it okay? Should we be more pragmatic and go partisan? For example, if the access to women's health care become politically charged here, which in the Women's Fund always has included access to abortion care when necessary and being a private decision. So since we know many Republicans who believe in that right as part of the Women's Fund, that they don't believe, is it necessary for those Republican voices to be the ones to voice it? What's your advice?
I don't think you stopped your advocacy, but I think you need to be realistic. And I'll give you a perfect example for myself. They were trying to eliminate. There was a restriction in law that didn't allow gay couples to adopt. Okay, they wanted the law repealed. Well, I could just tell you from my experience being on the inside, they wanted me to run it as a Republican to say it's not going to happen, but it will happen organically. You need to take a deep breath. And I know that you want to do it and you want to push the issue, but you're beating your head against a wall, right? You could be right, but I think, as one of my law professors say, you could be dead right? So you, in other words, if there's other issues, I think it's obvious right now that issue is going to be very difficult to move, right? And eventually, what I had said to the community, right, it's like, it's going to go away and the courts are going to do it. And the reason being, because don't waste your resources in Tallahassee, because it's not going to happen. But I can't even tell you how many foster parents I knew that were gay couples. I said, what I think you should do is have somebody file a bill to prohibit foster parents, gay foster parents from fostering. The system will collapse. And then all of a sudden you're going to have a whole new set of advocates saying, no. Oh, wait, you could foster, but you can't adopt. I said, you have to change the narrative. And that's exactly what happened. I think the couple was fostering a child and they ended up going to court and ended up adopting it. So, and that changed the law. It changed the law, but the courts had to do it. Some things are going to be better done in the courts, to be honest with you. I wish I could tell you that if you work hard enough and you advocate hard enough in this political environment, the abortion issues are going to be tough to move, are going to be very tough to move. You saw what just happened. They had 15 weeks. A lot of people thought that was ridiculous. And then they went to 6 weeks. So it's, there are some issues that I would say are better left for another day. Timing is everything in politics, right? Timing is everything in a lot of things we do. Think about the timing and all of the other issues that you guys have and prioritize them in terms of, there's going to be a constitutional amendment, right? Put your energy into getting it on the ballot versus your energy in Tallahassee. Put your energy where it will work, not where you're going to be frustrated.
So taking it out of something as controversial, so taking that same question to human trafficking or early child learning, does it make the difference who you send to go and speak? Do you need to make sure that somebody who's voting for that candidate?
Well, look, I pick the members on my bills very strategically, and there are some amazing Democrats who get a lot of stuff done because they're there to work and they're well respected in the legislature. So it doesn't always have to be a Republican. And you could also get a Republican that's got a problem with leadership, meaning you gotta know your member and what their relationship, and that's where I would go back to where a lobbyist can come in, right? Because they know the inside baseball, who's in good, who's in bad. Did you pledge to the wrong guy for speaker? You know, that kind of thing, or gal for speaker. There's a lot of inside baseball. And you also have to know the issue and the chairs, right? You know, I've got a chair on one committee. I mean, I can't get anything from him. Right? So what do? You know, I need somebody to talk some sense into him, right? So it's depends on, you know, what his relation, maybe I find his best friend in the legislature. Are you not going to hear the bill of your best friend? Right? So it doesn't always work, but it's strategic in terms of who you choose to run your legislation. And I won't tell you that it's always better if you use a Republican. That's not the case. I mean, there are some very dynamic, well-respected Democrats.
A similar question about leveraging resources together. In your experience, what is the effect of more than one organization banding together? So I'm going to pick the ones that I'm speaking to. So Lead for Ladies, the Women's Fund, Girl Power, Girls Inc., the YWCA, and Christie House. How do we need to represent ourselves? If we're looking at a coalition, do we sign a letter together? Is it a petition together? Do we?
It depends what you want to accomplish. It depends on what you want to accomplish. I mean, if you've got a piece of legislation that you want to promote, well, yeah, a coalition works and you come together and you always, everything you print on your talking points has all of your logos on it, and you come as a united front and you're all saying the same thing. Remember that the problem I had with the human trafficking this last year is everybody was, you know, promoting a different piece, and everybody got very confused. You want to be very focused, laser focused in terms of what is your message and what are you trying to accomplish. And yeah, there's always better in numbers, because quite frankly, I utilize the memberships of my organizations to pick up the phone and call a member because they live in his district to say, hey, listen, or, you know, the more people you have, the more people are going to have a personal relationship. A lot of you have a personal relationship with Vicky Lopez, right? But you may not with others, but somebody in your group they may have gone to high school with them. They may have gone to church with them. You know, they're in their neighborhood, you know, so the more people you have and the more ability to direct connect, the better.
Well, I will confess, Ellyn, that I asked our media specialist to take a picture of you on the screen and he's sitting here, because I'm going to text that to Vicky Lopez and tell her that we invoked her and that she was missed today and we're really connected. So, you know, it's a true thing. And I really learned that from Vicky, that she would want to hear that from me. It's not just because I'm asking her, you know, to support one thing or another. She wants to keep in touch, right? We had another question about anything that you think is specifically right and ready for action. So at the Women's Fund, we talk about leveraging resources on behalf of women and girls. But we also talk about finding gaps and needs whose time has come. For example, the early learning educators issue. It was brought to our attention with the thousands of brilliant people who are working on it. There was a gap in need of getting the grassroots leaders' voices out to be able to advocate for policy. And so it's still relatively early days because these things take time, but our hope is that the empowering early learning educators' voices will gel. And they do have a website now that they're just launching to be able to take those issues and do what you advise us to do. One voice, this is what we are all together advocating for. For example, you know, the essential worker status, for example, and those things being articulated, right? So that's one issue that we think the time has come. There's another issue that we're finding about maternal and infant mortality and morbidity statistics. So not only is the United States losing status globally as far as maternal and infant health, but it's also got a huge disparity racially, and so that's a canary in the coal mine. As you said before, student who is bullied, Women's Fund is always advocating for all women and children, right? But there are canaries in the coal mine. So you weren't here earlier, but we had our gender equity dashboard and some of the data and Viviana Pacheco, our senior research and policy manager, was saying it's clear you're 3 times more likely to die if you're a Black mother than a white mother. So this data is here. Many thousands, million people are working on this issue, and it feels like an issue that time has come. Is that something that you feel is, what issues do you think their time has come? What issues are right and legislature is ready to act on?
Well, I mean, look, they were ready to act on affordable housing. That was always seen as a liberal or democratic issue, right? In my mind, and they were ready to act, and they did, right? Because they realized it touched a lot more people. You know, sometimes it takes a while for issues to marinate, and then you need to have leadership. I mean, the good news for you guys right now is the Speaker of the Florida House has a significant interest in human trafficking, significant interest. But sometimes you need to work an issue 3, 4, 5 years and have it boil up and have the right people advocating on the inside. Like an issue like that, I work a lot with, you know, especially when I deal a lot with Tracy Davis and Senator Osgood, right? Great advocates, you know, for the Black community, especially if you're trying to, you know, kind of narrow that gap in terms of mortality, you know, but, you know, what are you asking for? What do you want to do? And how do you make that happen? I mean, you know, and sometimes again, it's incremental, but you've got to have specifics. So I don't know, I can't think of any issue, honestly, off the top of my head that is right. It was like rapid fire this last session. I mean, any and every issue was on the table and they were all passing in rapid fire. Won't make comment on whether they were good or bad or ugly. It was just rapid fire. And it was driven by leadership, right? It was driven by the plaza level, the governor's office, as well as, you know, the passion that Pasadomo had for affordable housing, and then the passion that, you know, the speaker had for the issues that were important to him. So what's right really depends on what, you know, a lot of times, and just so you understand government, a lot of times what's right is what makes the headline, right? So for years, I tried to shut down the internet cafes. I did the gaming bill. I felt they were predatory, whatever. Couldn't do it. Wasn't right. We had a scandal. Lieutenant Governor was removed from office. They came back in special session, wiped out all internet cafes, and were so overreactive they took out Chuck E. Cheese because they didn't realize how broad the bill was. So very often what's right is politically is not right as an issue, right? I mean, the issue's been right for a long time. You make the headline, so it's rotten and they need to fix it. I said the biggest challenge we have with government, it's reactive. It's not very rarely proactive. When I see proactive legislation, like, you know, the Live Local bill, which probably needs some tweaking, right? That's huge. We did the Always Ready. I was very much a part of the Always Ready legislation, which provided was going to provide billions of dollars to address sea level rise and climate change. And oh, by the way, that was a Democratic issue until the Florida Speaker of the House decided that he was going to say the words climate change on the House floor. And we got him to do that. So it sometimes just takes one brave person to step up and say, I'm willing to own it. And you need to find that champion.
You know, my dad's kind of Republican, Ellen. You guys vote, you gotta run again.
Me?
Yes,
I got a 9-year-old to raise. Maybe someday, but no, I loved it when I did it. But, you know, it's time to move on. Let other people take the reins.
I think if, unless anybody's got a final question here, do you have any final calls to action? Or
No, I mean, guys, keep doing your good work. You know, and anything that I can do to help guide you, I'm happy to do. You've got some good people in your organization. I'm looking at a lot of the names, and you guys have done some great work. And just keep doing what you're doing. I'm happy. I'm here to help.
well, Ellen, you made the mistake of giving me your cell phone number. But I'm a mom too, so I understand. But there's just, it's priceless. As we grow our voice, we do have 4 programs, but we have 2 other things that we'll throw some slides up now. We have a legislative advocacy committee, but we also have a volunteer, and it's relatively new, and we're just building our muscle. But for people to sign up to be impact agents, as we do grow our muscle and start to feed that beast, what do we, as a nonpartisan and really seriously nonpartisan and issue-oriented organization, you know, how do we feed our impact agents, our board, our 8,000 people on our e-blast list, and all the incredible sister and brotherhood of organizations we collaborate with day in and day out? How do we feed calls to action to those to all of us that are actionable, right? You can be dead right to do law, right? We want to be practical, and you need to know who we are to be able to do that. So we did have some calls to action here. We thank you all for your honesty. Many of you did not know who all of your representatives were, whether they're local or state or county. That's okay. You're empowered, and there's a link to find out who those representatives are, and they do all work for all of us. So feel empowered, and please do it. Do check your voter registration and update any needed information. Don't be lazy. Sometimes it takes me, instead of every 6 months to get my teeth cleaned, I get busy and I make sure that my daughter's appointment is made, but not my own. Your voter registration is hygiene. You must make sure you move, make sure my district changed, right? Make sure you're up to date. Please sign up and get our e-blast. They're interesting. We've got good stuff going on. We will have a second annual town hall, which will be the county mayor's proposed budget and looking at how it affects women and girls. Whoever our county mayor is moving forward, we do intend to continue on with this annual town hall. So please stay tuned and do show up and have your questions ready when we do have the town hall, and will probably be sometime in August, right? When the budget's ready. It's very, very influential in what happens in our county, and showing up, your voices can make a huge difference. And you might not necessarily have to speak, but maybe we all come and we sit in the chamber together, and a few of us speak, and then we can all go out and have a broad water. We're going to stay on some of this, a completely optional second part of the session for those of you who are here locally. If you'd like to stay, we are not the core anchor leaders of the Floridians Protecting Freedoms initiative. There are 4 or 5 core organizations that are equal organizations that are leading a statewide petition drive, but we are a signatory supporting organization. So we do have petitions here that is in support of women's health care. One of the key platforms for the Women's Fund has always been that women's health care includes access to abortion care when necessary, medically necessary, and it is the decision of the woman and of the birthing person and they're healthcare professionals. So if you'd like to stay on, both virtually or here in person, we'll be going on to that now. But we're gonna, before we say goodbye to you, those of you who aren't gonna stay, please know that we do convene every month. We get together, we focus on one of our pillars. What you need to know of issues that are affecting women and girls here in Miami-Dade County, and what you can do about it. We never just talk about fish without giving you fishing poles. So know that we're going to be meeting on Thursday, July 6th. I know, really close to the 4th. There's really interesting data. Academic degrees we're talking about, not Celsius and Fahrenheit. We're talking about academic degrees and dollars, as in dollars, pesos, euros, money. There are fascinating disparities that I didn't know anything about in women getting education, higher education degrees, and not finding equities, finding really major inequities, especially interestingly enough, with high achieving Latinas and getting high degrees and low wages. So once again, we put a gender lens on everything, and we put additional lenses on. If you don't put lenses on, you're going to miss a lot of things. So we keep on learning, we keep on iterating, and if you want to continue, just what do we need to know to support women and girls in Miami-Dade County? First Thursday of every month. So we thank you so much. Please do the exit survey, because data matters, right? It matters for our funders, and it matters for how Camila and Vivi and Sam and I plan these impact collaboratives. Your feedback is really essential. So please do that. So if you're not interested in this next portion, thank you very much for joining us. Nobody will be offended if anybody needs to leave, but I'm going to go on to this constitutional amendment initiative petition form. So I'm going to be very precise, and I'm going to read. I'm not going to make anything up, no ad-libbing a la Marian Liar. This is a ballot title. It's an amendment to limit government interference with abortion. So there have been a lot of groups who've been working and testing to see what the best language would be to address this issue, to bring it to the people, to bring this on a ballot so we would vote directly. So it wouldn't go through the legislators or elected representatives, but would be up to 61% vote of people across the state. So apparently over 70% positively reflect the language of this ballot petition. So the ballot summary states, no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability, or when necessary to protect the patient's health, as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. This amendment does not change the legislature's constitutional authority to require notification to a parent or guardian before a minor has an abortion. So this is what the request is for this to be put on a ballot. There are about over 800,000 ballot signatures that need to be collected, which they organizers said that we need over 900,000 collected petitions just to get it on the ballot. After that, and over 61% of people need to vote in favor. So the Women's Fund, once again, is one of the many organizations that is reaching out to collect petitions. If you're online, there are links there for you to be able to go to the website, download the petition, and to read all kinds of do's and don'ts. Every Tuesday, there's an official training, and I've done it, Camila's done it, and others very informative of what to do and what not to do. So there are drop-off centers for the ballot. If you're here and you'd like to sign it today, we actually have lots of pens and lots of ballots or lots of petitions. You can also take some with you. Just a few key points. If you do decide to download petitions and share them with others, please make sure you do it right. If somebody signs a ballot, they don't put in either their voter registration or their date of birth. If they don't sign it, if they don't put the date on, then it's not valid. Okay, so those petitions would have to be cured. Also, if you collect 10 petitions and then you don't deliver them correctly, all 10 of those people are going to think that their voices were heard, and they're not. So it's a true responsibility. Let me make this funny. I sold the most Girl Scout cookies in my troop when I was in 4th grade. Then I had some real trouble delivering them all. Ended up happening, but I was pretty irresponsible for some time. If it would have been on the timeline of getting them in on time, not all the cookies were delivered on time, right? So I would have done unintended consequences and damaged the very drive that I was supposed to support. So please, if you're going to do it, please take that responsibility very seriously. We did have some media training for our organization as well. We respect everyone's opinions and thoughts here. My opinion does not need to be yours. I will respect anyone here who has a different, and even in my own family. That is completely fine. There is absolute respect. Please do not engage with anyone who has an opinion that is different from your own. This is not a moral judgment. This is an issue of respect, like all issues that we do. So I think those are the two biggest points, but they're not all of them. The website is very well organized and very well resourced. So once again, we defer there. We defer to the media inquiries there to that website. I'm going to ask if anybody online has any questions. We will monitor that. But for those who, so I'll stay here to monitor that, but I will say for those of you who are interested in the petitions, you can take them. There's a stack of them in there, and there are pens if anybody wants to go in and sign, and if you'd like to take petitions with you. So I'll ask our team, Vero and team, can you leave people in there? Anybody who'd like to take petitions, and I will just sit here for a minute with those who are online. And
I have a question, not particularly to that, but to the gathering information that you're doing. So being a person that would be in those statistics, right? I'm a brown woman, I researched heard. What are you guys doing with that data? So you're collecting the data, but what are you doing with it? Is my question, because I did gather from what you presented today, what you do.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So of the things that we do, the Women's Fund, we convene. So we did, and it's available on our website. So we looked at the statistics and we brought together experts to talk about thought leadership and bringing that statistics to awareness. So we did an impact collaborative on the mental health crisis, full of information and things that
So the call to action was to show the inequity.
To show the inequity and talk about possible causes and talk about things that one could do to prevent, right? And then we also did the Black Affairs Advisory Board, just like the Miami-Dade Commission for Women. There's a Black Advisory Council. So they thought that it was so well done and so interesting that they invited us to reproduce the panel. So Kami and I put together the panel again, and we did a meeting at Florida Memorial University with the board. And that got coverage on CBS and others. Last evening, colleagues from the Commission for Women, in partnership with the YWCA, who's very active in this space, Mother Carrie Doulas, the March of Dimes, with wearing coalitions as well. So this is, we were talking with Ellyn that we're part of the Human Trafficking Coalition, Miami-Dade, and the South Florida Human Trafficking Coalition. Women's Club, we're also active participants in the Domestic Violence Coalition. We're also active in the Healthier Miami-Dade and the Healthy Babies Coalition.
Would you be able to share how someone from the public is able to join the coalition? Or do you have to be associated with?
I'm most certain that you can't even come to the public forums of Miami-Dade Commission for Women, March of
But not to join the group, right?
No, Healthier Miami-Dade, I think it's any citizen. Any citizen, and yes, we can, and Camila and Viviana and I were. We can give you Candace's information on how to sign up, and Nina Roque is the Executive Director of Commission for Women.
Commission for Women, just wanted to invite everyone, our next public forum is June 28th in Miami Beach. I believe we're gonna be in the golf course, but I will put it online and I'll share it tomorrow. So we welcome everyone to the time. We're actually in the process of making our policy recommendations to the BCC, which we'll have ready, expect October, November. So we invite you to attend, collaborate, give us feedback, suggestions. We're open and ready to engage.
So again, since not everybody understands all the CCs, the Commission for Women takes all the input of interested citizens and puts recommendations to the county commission for how do we elevate and address issues affecting women and girls. So that's really important if a lot of us show up and fine, and then show up to support. So that's a good one. So ongoing, some of these issues, they're not completely addressed. So there are a lot of people working in those spaces, and we are finding that coalitions are essential to be addressing some of these statistics. So you'll find, if you keep in touch with us, you'll find different ways that we're either saying, go and support here or join this coalition, or we may be saying we're spearheading some initiatives, we're looking at some of those things. We never try and ever reinvent a wheel, right? We're not trying to lead this petition coalition. We talked about advocacy and part, we did 2 impact collaboratives, elevating faith-based voices and in support of choice, health, and justice and rights. Right, so we those are gaps in needs. That's what the Women's Fund tries to do. So if you stay in touch with us, we'll elevate conversations, and sometimes it's with us, and sometimes it's in coalitions. One of the polls that you participated in, and we do this always. You don't have to come through us. We would love you to be in direct touch with any of the panelists on any of our impact collaboratives. So if you attend every month. You'll have the opportunity to go directly and speak with them as well. Stronger together, but not always. We don't have to be the belly button. Sometimes yes, sometimes we're the finger. Any other questions before we go on? Thank everybody so much. I know it's difficult to be hybrid, but it's amazing. Amazing, the incredible people who were there today. Thank you so much. And to see all of you. So. And I think there are no more questions, so I think we can end the online portion. Thanks, y'all. Have a great day. Bye.